The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Le Chateau Noir, one of Berlin's most exclusive restaurants. Amara Williams adjusted her black apron for the third time that morning, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared for another day of serving Germany's elite. At 26, she had been working at the restaurant for 8 months, sending most of her earnings back home to Detroit to support her younger brother's medical treatments. The restaurant buzzed with quiet efficiency as the staff prepared for the lunch service. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and fresh white orchids adorned every table. Amara had grown accustomed to the whispered conversations in multiple languages, the designer clothes, and the casual discussions about million-dollar business deals over appetizers. Her manager, Klaus Richter, emerged from his office with his usual stern expression. A man in his 50s with graying hair and piercing blue eyes, Klaus had made it clear from day one that perfection was the only acceptable standard at Le Chateau Noir. He scanned the dining room with the precision of a military inspector. "Williams," Klaus called out, his accent thick with authority. "Table 7 needs immediate attention. Our most important guest has arrived early." Amara nodded and glanced toward Table 7, positioned in the restaurant's prime location with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's financial district. She had heard whispers about this particular guest for weeks. Victor Steinberg, the tech billionaire whose company had revolutionized artificial intelligence across Europe. His net worth was estimated at $12 billion, and his influence extended far beyond the business world. As she approached the table, she studied the man seated there. Victor appeared to be in his early 40s, with sharp features and perfectly styled dark hair. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Amara's annual rent. His fingers moved rapidly across his phone screen, and his jaw was set in concentration. "Good morning, sir," Amara said softly, maintaining the professional smile she had perfected over months of service. "Welcome to Le Chateau Noir. May I start you with something to drink?" Victor didn't look up from his phone. His fingers continued their rapid dance across the screen as if she hadn't spoken at all. Amara waited patiently, accustomed to customers who treated service staff as invisible. After a full minute of silence, she tried again. "Sir, would you like to see our wine selection? Or perhaps some sparkling water to begin?" This time, Victor glanced up, his gray eyes scanning her face with casual indifference. When he spoke, his voice carried the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything. "Coffee. Black. And make sure it's actually hot this time. Yesterday's was lukewarm at best." Amara's smile didn't waver. "Of course, sir. I'll have that right out for you." She turned to leave, but Victor's voice stopped her. "And try not to spill it. I have important calls to make, and I can't afford to have my suit ruined by clumsy help." The comment stung, but Amara maintained her composure. She had dealt with difficult customers before, though few had been quite so dismissive. She made her way to the coffee station, where her colleague Maria was preparing espressos for another table. "Let me guess," Maria whispered in accented English. "Table 7. Amara nodded. "He seems charming." Maria rolled her eyes. "That one thinks he owns the world. Last week, he made Sarah cry because his salmon was slightly overcooked. Klaus had to comp his entire meal." As Amara prepared Victor's coffee, she focused on the technique her trainer had taught her. The perfect temperature, the right strength, presented on a silver tray with the restaurant's finest china. She had learned that attention to detail often softened even the most difficult customers. When she returned to Table 7, Victor was engaged in what appeared to be a heated phone conversation. He gestured emphatically with one hand while gripping the phone with the other. Amara set the coffee down gently, ensuring the cup didn't make a sound against the saucer. Nein, das ist völlig unacceptable," Victor said into the phone, his voice rising slightly. "Die Zahlen sind katastrophal. Wir müssen sofort handeln, oder wir verlieren Millionen." Amara understood every word. Victor was berating someone about unacceptable numbers and potential losses in the millions. She had been studying German intensively for 2 years, initially to surprise her grandmother who had immigrated from Berlin decades ago. Her grandmother had passed away before Amara could demonstrate her progress, but she had continued studying, finding comfort in the connection to her family's history. Victor ended his call abruptly and noticed the coffee. He lifted the cup, took a sip, and his expression shifted to one of mild approval. For a moment, Amara thought she might have earned a small victory. Finally, someone who understands the difference between coffee and colored water, he said, setting the cup down. Though I suppose even broken clocks are right twice a day. Amara bit back her response and simply nodded. Is there anything else I can get for you while you review the menu? Victor waved her away dismissively. Just leave me be for now. I have real work to do. As she walked away, Amara heard Victor's phone ring again. This time, his conversation was entirely in German, and his tone suggested he was speaking to someone he considered beneath him. She couldn't help but listen as she attended to nearby tables. Listen carefully, Victor said in German, unaware that anyone around him could understand. I don't care what excuses you have. The Berlin project needs to be completed by Friday, or I'll find someone who actually knows how to do their job. And tell the construction crew that if they can't work faster, I'll replace them with people who appreciate the opportunity. His words grew harsher as the conversation continued. He complained about lazy workers, incompetent subordinates, and the declining quality of the labor force. Each comment revealed more about his character, painting a picture of a man who viewed other people as expendable resources. When Victor ended that call, another customer at a nearby table caught Amara's attention. She served them efficiently, all while remaining within earshot of table 7. Victor's next phone call proved even more revealing. The restaurant staff here is mediocre at best, he said in German to whoever was on the other end. They hire anyone these days. No standards, no proper training. Half of them probably don't even speak proper German. The service industry has really gone downhill when they let just anyone work in establishments like this. Amara felt her hands clench involuntarily. She had worked incredibly hard to earn her position at Le Chateau Noir, competing against dozens of other candidates. She spoke 4 languages fluently, held a bachelor's degree in international business, and had previously worked at high-end restaurants in 3 different countries. But Victor saw only what he wanted to see. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her brother Marcus back in Detroit. The message was brief, but carried the weight of months of worry. Treatment is working, but insurance is fighting the next round. Might need help with the gap. Amara's chest tightened. Marcus was only 22 and had been battling a rare autoimmune condition for the past year. The treatments were experimental and expensive, but they were working. Every dollar she earned mattered, and she couldn't afford to lose this job, no matter how difficult some customers proved to be. Victor's voice rose again as he switched between German and English during his next call. He was negotiating some sort of acquisition, casually discussing the elimination of hundreds of jobs as if he were ordering lunch. His tone suggested he found the entire process amusing rather than concerning. The workforce reduction will save us approximately $8 million annually, he said in German. Most of these positions are redundant anyway. We'll keep the essential personnel and eliminate the dead weight. It's just good business. Amara continued her work, serving other tables while Victor conducted his calls. She watched him interact briefly with Klaus, who had approached to personally ensure everything met Victor's standards. Even Klaus, typically commanding and confident, seemed diminished in Victor's presence, nodding eagerly at every comment and request. As the lunch hour approached, more customers began arriving. The restaurant filled with the quiet murmur of conversation, the gentle clink of silverware against china, and the soft jazz that played overhead. Despite the elegant atmosphere, Amara found herself increasingly disturbed by Victor's casual cruelty during his phone conversations. When she returned to refill his coffee, Victor was reviewing documents on his tablet. He glanced up as she approached, and, for the first time, he seemed to really look at her. His gaze was calculating, as if he were assessing her worth as a person. "You're not German," he said suddenly. It wasn't a question. "No, sir. I'm American," Amara replied, maintaining her professional tone. Victor nodded as if this confirmed something he already suspected. "I thought so. There's a particular way Americans carry themselves. Always so eager to please, so desperate for approval. It's quite transparent, really." The comment hit its mark, but Amara kept her expression neutral. "Is there anything specific I can get for you from the menu today, sir?" Victor's phone rang again before he could respond. As he answered, Amara stepped back to give him privacy, but she remained close enough to hear his conversation. This time, he was speaking to someone about a charity event, and his comments revealed yet another layer of his character. "Of course I'll attend," he said in German. "It's good for appearances. These charity functions are essential for maintaining the right image, even though most of the causes are utterly pointless. People need to see successful individuals supporting the community, even if the actual impact is negligible." He continued, describing the attendees as bleeding hearts and naive idealists who failed to understand that real change came through business success, not charitable donations. His cynicism was absolute, extending even to philanthropic efforts that he publicly supported. As Victor's call ended, Amara found herself thinking about her own reasons for being in Berlin. She had come to Europe not just for work, but to understand her family's history and to challenge herself in new ways. Her grandmother had fled Germany during World War II, eventually settling in Detroit, where she raised her family while never forgetting her homeland. Amara's decision to learn German and work in Berlin was partly in homage to her grandmother's memory. Victor set his phone down and looked directly at Amara. "I'll have the lobster," he said without consulting the menu. "And make sure the chef understands that I want it prepared properly. None of that overcooked nonsense that seems to be the standard these days." "Certainly, sir. Would you like to pair that with one of our wine selections?" Victor waved dismissively. "Just bring me your most expensive bottle. Price is irrelevant when quality is concerned." As Amara walked toward the kitchen, she overheard Victor beginning another phone call. This time, his conversation took a turn that made her stop in her tracks. He was talking to someone about immigration policies and labor laws, and his comments revealed depths of prejudice that went far beyond mere arrogance. "The problem with this country," Victor said in German, his voice carrying a tone of absolute certainty, "is that we've become too lenient with foreign workers. They come here with no real skills, no understanding of our culture, and somehow expect to be treated as equals. It's diluting the quality of everything, from service to craftsmanship." Amara felt her breath catch. She had encountered racism before, but rarely so casually expressed, especially not in a language the speaker assumed she couldn't understand. Victor continued his tirade, describing foreign workers as burdens on the system who took jobs from qualified Germans and lowered standards across entire industries. "Take this restaurant, for example," Victor continued. "Half the staff probably doesn't even belong in this country. They smile and nod, but they lack the sophistication needed for truly excellent service. It's a reflection of broader social problems that no one wants to address honestly." The irony wasn't lost on Amara. Victor was sitting in one of Berlin's finest restaurants, being served by staff members from various countries, all of whom had been rigorously trained and selected for their expertise. Yet his prejudices prevented him from seeing their actual qualifications and contributions. She placed Victor's order with the kitchen, her hands shaking slightly as she wrote down the details. The head chef, Antoine, was a French master who had earned 3 Michelin stars over his career. He noticed her distress immediately. "Something wrong, Amara?" Antoine asked in his gentle accent. "Just a challenging customer," she replied. "Nothing I can't handle."
This is
Antoine
absolutely
studied her face
unacceptable.
carefully.
I demand
He
to
had
speak
worked
to
in
the manager
high-end restaurants
immediately.
for decades and had developed an ability to read both staff and customers with remarkable accuracy. "If someone is treating you poorly, you don't have to tolerate it. Klaus may prioritize profit, but I prioritize my team." Amara appreciated the support, but she knew the reality of her situation. Jobs at restaurants like Le Chateau Noir were highly sought after, and she couldn't afford to create problems with important customers. She needed this position, not just for herself, but for Marcus and his ongoing medical needs. When she returned with Victor's wine, he was concluding another call that revealed even more about his worldview. He was discussing a business partnership with someone in the United States, and his comments about American workers were equally dismissive. "Americans are so predictably optimistic," he said in German. "They think hard work automatically leads to success, which is charmingly naive. They don't understand that success is primarily about understanding power structures and leveraging advantages properly." Victor noticed the wine and gestured for Amara to pour. As she did, he continued his conversation, occasionally glancing at her with the casual indifference one might show toward furniture. She realized he had no conception of her as an individual with her own story struggles, and aspirations. The lunch service continued around them, with other customers enjoying their meals and conversations. Amara served her other tables efficiently, but she found her attention repeatedly drawn back to Victor and his ongoing phone calls. Each conversation revealed new layers of arrogance and prejudice, painting a picture of someone who viewed the world primarily through the lens of his own superiority. When Victor's lobster arrived, prepared to perfection by Antoine and his team, he barely acknowledged the presentation. He took a bite, nodded slightly, and immediately returned to his phone. Amara watched him eat while conducting business, never once considering the skill and effort that had gone into preparing his meal. As the afternoon wore on, Victor's conversations grew increasingly personal. He spoke about his ex-wife, whom he described as grasping and undeserving, despite the fact that she had helped build his company during its early years. He discussed his children, whom he saw as disappointing because they hadn't shown sufficient interest in the family business. His cynicism extended to every aspect of his personal life. Amara found herself thinking about her own family, particularly her grandmother's stories about leaving Germany and starting over in a new country. Her grandmother had faced real hardship and discrimination, yet she had never spoken with the casual cruelty that characterized Victor's every conversation. She had maintained her dignity and compassion despite experiencing genuine suffering. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Victor, who had been born into privilege and had accumulated more wealth than most people could imagine, spoke with constant bitterness and contempt. Her grandmother, who had lost everything and rebuilt her life from nothing, had remained kind and hopeful until her final days. As Victor finished his meal, he made one final phone call that would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. He was speaking to someone about a business deal in Africa, and his comments revealed the full extent of his prejudicial worldview. "These people don't understand modern business practices," Victor said in German, his tone dripping with condescension. "They operate on tribal mentalities and emotional decision-making. It's like dealing with children who need constant supervision and direction. Profitable, certainly, but exhausting from a management perspective." Amara felt something inside her snap. She had listened to hours of Victor's casual bigotry, watching him dismiss and demean people from every background while being served by the very individuals he claimed were inferior. The combination of her exhaustion, worry about her brother, and anger at Victor's behavior had reached a breaking point. She approached his table to clear his plates, her heart pounding as she made a decision that would change everything. Victor was just ending his call when she reached him, and he looked up with his usual expression of bored entitlement. "Sir," Amara said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing. Victor studied Amara's face more carefully now, sensing that something had shifted in their interaction. Her smile remained professional, but there was a new quality to her presence that he couldn't quite identify. For someone accustomed to reading people's intentions and motivations, this sudden change in dynamic was both unexpected and slightly unsettling. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you implying?" Victor asked, his tone sharpening with suspicion. Amara continued clearing his plates with practiced efficiency, maintaining her composed demeanor. "Oh, nothing specific, sir. It's just that your conversations about workforce management and cultural challenges sounded quite complex. You must deal with many different types of people in your business ventures." The comment was carefully neutral, but Victor detected an undercurrent he didn't appreciate. He was accustomed to service staff who remained invisible and silent, not ones who offered observations about his business dealings. His gray eyes narrowed as he attempted to reassert control over the situation. "My business dealings are neither your concern nor within your capacity to understand," Victor said coldly. "I suggest you focus on your actual responsibilities rather than eavesdropping on private conversations." "Of course, sir," Amara replied smoothly. "I apologize if I overstepped. It's just that working in international hospitality, one picks up bits and pieces of different languages. Sometimes it's hard not to notice when familiar words come up in conversation." Victor's expression froze. The implication of her words hit him like a physical blow, but he couldn't quite bring himself to believe what she seemed to be suggesting. Surely she hadn't understood his German conversations. The very idea seemed impossible, considering his assumptions about her background and capabilities. Familiar words, he repeated slowly, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. Amara set down his empty coffee cup and met his gaze directly. For the first time since she had begun serving him, she allowed her professional mask to slip slightly, revealing a glimpse of the intelligence and strength that lay beneath her service role. Well, words like catastrophal and unacceptable, she said quietly. They tend to stand out when someone is discussing business challenges. The blood drained from Victor's face. Those were the exact words he had used during his first phone call of the day, when he thought no one around him could possibly understand what he was saying. The realization that this waitress had not only heard but comprehended his conversation sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. "You speak German," he said, the words coming out as an accusation rather than a question. "Fließend," Amara replied simply. "Fluently." Victor's mind raced as he processed the implications. Every comment he had made about foreign workers, every dismissive remark about service staff, every prejudicial observation about different cultures, she had understood it all. He felt exposed in a way he hadn't experienced since childhood, as if someone had suddenly torn away a curtain he hadn't realized he was hiding behind. "How long have you been listening to my conversations?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and glanced around the restaurant. "I wasn't listening, sir," Amara replied calmly. "I was working. But when someone speaks loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear, and when they use a language I happen to understand, it's difficult to avoid comprehension." The quiet confidence in her voice was like nothing Victor had encountered from service staff. Most people in her position would have become flustered or apologetic when confronted by someone of his status and obvious anger. Instead, Amara seemed to be growing more self-assured with each exchange. "This is completely unacceptable," Victor said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I'll be speaking to your manager immediately about your inappropriate behavior and breach of customer privacy." Amara nodded thoughtfully. "That's certainly your right, sir. Though I should mention that Klaus speaks German as well. He's actually quite fluent, having grown up in Austria. He might be interested in discussing your observations about the restaurant staff and service standards." Victor felt trapped. Klaus had been courting his business for months, offering special treatments and private dining options. The manager had no idea that Victor had spent the afternoon criticizing the establishment and its employees in what he thought was a private language. The idea of Klaus learning about his comments was almost as disturbing as the realization that this waitress had understood everything. "What exactly do you want?" Victor asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Amara appeared to consider the question seriously. "I want to finish my shift, sir. I want to provide excellent service to all my customers, including you. And I want to go home tonight knowing that I've represented this restaurant and myself with dignity and professionalism." The answer was so unexpected that Victor found himself momentarily speechless. He had assumed she was angling for some sort of advantage, perhaps a tip or favorable treatment. The possibility that she simply wanted to do her job well hadn't occurred to him. "You're not going to use this information somehow?" he asked, hating the uncertainty in his own voice. Amara's expression softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of genuine sadness. "Sir, I've been working in service for 6 years. I've heard customers say things they probably wouldn't want repeated in dozens of different languages. My job is to serve food and drinks, not to judge people or expose their private thoughts." Victor studied her face, searching for signs of deception or hidden motives. What he found instead was something that made him profoundly uncomfortable, genuine hurt. This woman hadn't just overheard his comments. She had been wounded by them. He was forced to confront the reality that his words had real impact on real people, something he rarely had to consider in his insulated world. "However," Amara continued, her voice maintaining its professional tone, "I do think it's important for you to understand that your assumptions about people might not always be accurate." "What assumptions?" Victor asked defensively. "Well, for instance, your assumption that foreign workers lack sophistication or proper training," Amara said matter-of-factly. "I have a bachelor's degree in international business from the University of Michigan, with a focus on European markets. I speak English, Spanish, German, and French fluently, and I'm conversational in Italian. I've worked in restaurants in 4 different countries, specifically to gain international experience for my eventual career in hospitality management. Victor stared at her, his worldview tilting on its axis. Everything he thought he knew about this interaction was proving to be wrong. The unsophisticated foreign worker he had been dismissing all afternoon was actually more qualified in international business than many of his own employees. Before coming to Berlin, Amara continued, I spent 2 years working at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Barcelona, where I learned advanced wine service and specialized in accommodating international clientele. I came to Germany specifically to understand the European market from the inside, because I believe that real expertise comes from ground-level experience, not just theoretical knowledge. Each word hit Victor like a physical blow. He prided himself on being able to assess people quickly and accurately, yet he had completely misjudged this woman based purely on superficial observations and prejudicial assumptions. Why are you telling me this? He asked weakly. Because, Amara said gently, I think it's important for successful people like yourself to understand that the world is full of capable, ambitious, educated individuals who might be serving your coffee or cleaning your office or working in positions that don't immediately reveal their full potential. Everyone has a story, and most of those stories are more complex and interesting than they appear on the surface. Victor felt something he rarely experienced, shame. Not embarrassment at being caught, but genuine shame at the realization of how wrong he had been and how carelessly cruel his comments had been. This woman had been working hard to provide him with excellent service while he casually discussed the supposed inferiority of people exactly like her. I didn't realize, he began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. Of course you didn't, Amara said, without accusation. How could you? We live in different worlds, even when we're sharing the same space. You see a waitress. I see someone working toward a specific goal. You see foreign workers. I see individuals with their own dreams and challenges and qualifications. Victor's phone buzzed with an incoming call, but for the first time all day, he ignored it. The conversation with Amara had become more important than any business deal, though he couldn't quite explain why. What's your goal? He found himself asking. I want to open a chain of internationally focused restaurants that celebrate cultural exchange and provide opportunities for workers from different countries to showcase their skills and advance their careers, Amara said, her eyes lighting up with passion. I believe food service can be a bridge between cultures rather than a reflection of social hierarchies. Victor was stunned by the sophistication of her vision. It was exactly the kind of innovative, globally minded thinking that his own company claimed to value, yet he had completely failed to recognize it in the person serving his lunch. That's actually quite ambitious, he admitted. Yes, it is, Amara agreed. It's why I'm here, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. My grandmother always told me that if you want to lead people, you need to understand their experiences first. Your grandmother was German? Victor asked, latching onto this detail. Amara nodded. She fled Berlin in 1938 and eventually settled in Detroit. She used to tell me stories about the city before the war, about the restaurants and cafes where people from all over Europe would gather and share their cultures. I always dreamed of seeing that Berlin for myself. Victor felt another wave of shame. Here was someone with a personal connection to Germany's complex history, someone who had come to his country with respect and genuine interest in its culture, and he had dismissed her as unworthy of basic courtesy. And what do you think of Berlin now that you're here? He asked quietly. Amara considered the question carefully. It's a remarkable city, she said finally, full of history and possibility. Most people have been incredibly welcoming and kind. Germans, in my experience, are generally fair-minded and hardworking, with a deep appreciation for quality and precision. The implicit contrast with his own behavior wasn't lost on Victor. She was describing positive qualities in his countrymen while diplomatically avoiding any direct criticism of his conduct. But you've encountered some less welcoming individuals, he pressed. Everyone encounters difficult people sometimes, Amara said diplomatically. It's part of working with the public. Most of the time, though, I think people's rudeness comes from stress or personal problems rather than genuine malice. Victor realized she was offering him an excuse, a way to rationalize his behavior as something other than the casual cruelty it actually was. The generosity of her interpretation made him feel even worse about his actions. "I owe you an apology," he said suddenly, the words coming out before he had fully decided to say them. Amara looked surprised. "That's not necessary, sir." "Yes, it is," Victor insisted. "My comments today were inappropriate and hurtful, regardless of whether I thought anyone could understand them. You didn't deserve to be subjected to that kind of ignorance." For the first time since their conversation began, Amara's professional composure cracked slightly. Victor saw a flicker of genuine emotion cross her face before she regained control. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you might realize." Victor's phone buzzed again, and this time he looked at it with annoyance rather than urgency. His business empire could survive a few minutes without his constant attention, but this conversation felt too important to interrupt. "Can I ask you something?" Victor said hesitantly. Amara nodded. "How do you maintain such grace under pressure? If someone had spoken about me the way I spoke about foreign workers today, I would have been furious. Yet you're handling this with remarkable composure." Amara smiled, and, for the first time, it was completely genuine. "My grandmother taught me something that has served me well," she said. "She told me that other people's opinions of you are really just reflections of their own character and experiences. When someone treats you poorly, it says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations." Victor absorbed this wisdom, recognizing it as more sophisticated than most business philosophy he had encountered in boardrooms. This waitress possessed a level of emotional intelligence and maturity that many of his highly paid executives lacked. "Your grandmother sounds like a remarkable woman," he said. "She was," Amara agreed, her voice softening with memory. "She came to America with nothing but determination and kindness. She built a good life for her family through hard work and by treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their station in life. I try to honor her example every day." Victor found himself thinking about his own grandmother, a woman who had died when he was young but who had always shown him unconditional love and acceptance. He couldn't remember the last time he had considered her example when making decisions about how to treat other people. "I think she would be proud of you," Victor said, meaning it completely. Tears gathered in Amara's eyes before she blinked them away. "I hope so," she whispered. The moment of shared vulnerability transformed something fundamental between them. Victor realized that he was seeing Amara not as a service worker or a representative of some category he had mentally created, but as an individual human being with her own history, dreams, and dignity. "I need to ask you something difficult," Victor said, his voice serious. "And I want you to answer honestly, regardless of any concerns about your job or my reaction." Amara straightened, preparing herself for whatever was coming. "What do you think of me?" Victor asked. "Not as a customer, but as a person, based on what you heard today and how I've treated you." The question hung in the air between them, heavy with potential. Amara took a deep breath, considering Victor's question with the seriousness it deserved. She could feel the weight of the moment, understanding that her response would either build a bridge or burn one completely. Around them, the elegant restaurant continued its sophisticated dance of service and dining. But at table 7, two people from vastly different worlds stood at a crossroads of genuine human connection. "You want honesty?" Amara asked quietly. Victor nodded, though she could see the apprehension in his eyes. "I think you're a man who has forgotten what it feels like to be vulnerable," Amara said carefully. "Your success has insulated you from experiences that keep most people grounded and empathetic. Today, listening to your conversations, I heard someone who has convinced himself that his achievements make him fundamentally better than other people, rather than simply more fortunate." Victor winced, but didn't interrupt. "But," Amara continued, "I also think you're capable of growth. The fact that you're asking me this question, the fact that you apologized, suggests that somewhere inside, you remember what it feels like to be human rather than just successful." "That's more generous than I deserve," Victor admitted. "Maybe," Amara agreed. "But I've learned that people usually deserve the chance to be better than their worst moments." Victor was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. In his business life, feedback was typically either sycophantic praise or calculated criticism designed to achieve specific outcomes. He couldn't remember the last time someone had offered him such honest, thoughtful assessment without an agenda. Can I tell you something? Victor asked suddenly. Amara nodded encouragingly. I haven't had a genuine conversation with another person in months, Victor said, the admission clearly difficult for him. Everything in my life is transactional. People want something from me, or I need something from them. Even my personal relationships feel like negotiations. I had forgotten what it was like to talk to someone who sees me as just a person. Amara felt a pang of sympathy for him. Beneath the arrogance and casual cruelty, she recognized something she understood: loneliness. That sounds exhausting, she said gently. It is, Victor admitted. But it's also easier, in a way. When you assume everyone has ulterior motives, you never have to worry about trusting people or being disappointed by them. But you also never get to experience genuine connection, Amara pointed out. And, without that, success becomes pretty hollow, doesn't it? Victor looked at her with something approaching wonder. How did you become so wise about human nature while working in restaurants? Amara laughed softly. You meet every type of person imaginable in this business. You see people at their best and worst, often within the same meal. You learn to read emotions, to understand what people need beyond just food and drinks. It's actually excellent training for understanding human behavior. I never thought about it that way, Victor said. Most people don't, Amara replied. They see service work as mindless or temporary, not as a masterclass in psychology and human relations. Victor's phone buzzed insistently, but he continued to ignore it. For the first time in years, something felt more important than immediate business response. Can I ask you about your brother? Victor said suddenly. Amara looked surprised. What about him? You mentioned medical treatments earlier in a text message. I couldn't help but notice you seemed worried. Amara hesitated, unsure why Victor was asking or whether she wanted to share such personal information. You don't have to tell me, Victor said quickly. I realized that while I was conducting my business today, treating you like you were invisible, you were dealing with your own serious concerns. It made me think about how often I completely missed the full humanity of the people around me. The sincere interest in his voice convinced Amara to open up slightly. Marcus is 22, she said. He has a rare autoimmune condition that attacks his nervous system. The treatments are experimental, but they're working. The problem is that insurance companies fight covering experimental treatments, even when they're proving successful. So you're working here to help pay for his medical care, Victor said, understanding flooding his voice. Partly, Amara admitted. The exchange rate makes my euros worth more when I send them back to the States. And the experience here is invaluable for my future plans. But, yes, Marcus's health is my top priority. Victor felt another wave of shame as he realized the full context of their interaction. While he had been casually insulting her capabilities and worth, she had been working under the pressure of supporting a seriously ill family member. His problems that afternoon had consisted entirely of minor business irritations and social inconveniences. I'm sorry, he said quietly, about your brother, and about making your already difficult day harder with my behavior. Thank you, Amara said simply. Victor's mind was racing, but before he could formulate his next thought, Klaus appeared at their table with his professional smile and watchful eyes. Mr. Steinberg, Klaus said smoothly, I hope everything has been satisfactory today. Victor looked between Klaus and Amara, suddenly, aware that their extended conversation might have appeared unusual from the manager's perspective. Actually, Victor said carefully, your server Amara has provided exceptional service today. Truly exceptional. Klaus looked pleased but surprised. I'm delighted to hear that. Amara is one of our finest team members. I can see why, Victor replied, meaning it completely. After Klaus moved on to check other tables, Victor turned back to Amara with renewed focus. I want to do something, he said suddenly. Sir, Amara asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. I want to help with your brother's medical expenses, Victor said impulsively. And I want to learn more about your restaurant concept. Not as charity or pity, but because I recognize talent and vision when I see it. And I apparently missed both completely during our first several hours together. Amara's eyes widened with shock. Mr. Steinberg, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't possibly. Why not? Victor interrupted. I have more money than I can reasonably spend in several lifetimes. You have a family member who needs medical care and a business concept that could actually make the world a slightly better place. It seems like a logical partnership. Because we don't even know each other, Amara protested. And because accepting financial help from customers would compromise my position here and my own sense of integrity. Victor nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her caution. You're right, of course. I'm thinking too quickly and probably not clearly. But I appreciate the impulse, Amara said kindly. It tells me something important about who you really are beneath all the protection you've built around yourself. Victor considered this. What if I offered you a job instead? Something legitimate, where you could use your actual qualifications and work toward your goals while earning enough to help your brother? Amara studied his face carefully. What kind of job? My company is expanding into the European hospitality market, Victor said, his business mind engaging alongside his newfound personal awareness. We're looking for someone with international experience and cultural sensitivity to help develop our strategy. Someone who understands the industry from multiple perspectives and can help us avoid the kinds of cultural blindness I demonstrated today. You're serious? Amara asked. Completely, Victor replied. But I want you to know that this offer isn't guilt-driven charity. Based on what you've told me about your background and what I've observed of your intelligence and professionalism, you're exactly the kind of person we need. I was just too prejudiced and stupid to recognize it initially. Amara was quiet for several minutes, clearly thinking through the implications. Victor waited patiently, understanding that he had no right to pressure her for an immediate response. Can I ask you something? Amara said finally. Anything. Why does this matter to you so much? A few hours ago, you saw me as completely beneath your notice. What changed? Victor considered the question deeply before answering. I think you changed my perspective on what intelligence and worth actually look like. I've been surrounded by people with advanced degrees and impressive titles for so long that I forgot those things don't automatically translate to wisdom or character. He paused, gathering his thoughts. You've handled a difficult situation with more grace and insight than most of my highly paid executives would have managed. You've demonstrated emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and genuine compassion. Those are exactly the qualities that make someone valuable in any business context. And on a personal level? Amara pressed. Victor's expression became more vulnerable. On a personal level, talking with you has reminded me of who I used to be before success made me cynical and isolated. You've shown me that connection is still possible, even for someone who has forgotten how to be authentically human with other people. Amara nodded slowly, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. If I were to consider your offer, she said carefully, what would the actual role look like? Victor leaned forward, his excitement growing as he thought through the possibilities. You would lead our cultural integration initiatives for the European market. That would involve everything from training our staff on regional customs and expectations to developing partnerships with local businesses and organizations. That sounds like consulting work, Amara observed. Initially, yes, Victor agreed. But with the goal of building it into a permanent leadership position as we expand our presence. You'd have the authority to hire and develop your own team, implement your own strategies, and eventually perhaps incubate your own restaurant concepts under our corporate umbrella. Amara felt her pulse quickening. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she had been working toward, but years ahead of her expected timeline. And the compensation would be sufficient to help Marcus while I'm building this new division, she asked directly. The compensation would be commensurate with a senior management position at a major international corporation, Victor said firmly, plus equity options and full medical coverage that extends to family members. You're offering me everything I've been working toward, Amara said quietly. I'm offering you what you've already earned through your own efforts and capabilities, Victor corrected. I'm just finally recognizing it. Amara looked around the restaurant where she had spent the last 8 months learning and growing, thinking about Klaus and her colleagues who had become like family, considering the risk of leaving a sure thing for an uncertain opportunity with someone who had just hours before been treating her with casual contempt. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Of course, Victor agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that regardless of your decision about the job, I'm grateful for this conversation. You've given me something invaluable today. What's that? Amara asked. A reminder that the world is full of remarkable people doing important work, even when that work doesn't immediately appear remarkable to people like me. And a lesson in how much I can learn when I actually listen to people instead of just hearing what I expect to hear. Amara smiled, the expression both sad and hopeful. I'm glad something positive came out of this afternoon. Victor's phone rang again, and this time the caller ID showed his assistant's name with urgent in capital letters. He looked at Amara apologetically. I should probably take this, he said reluctantly. 3 weeks had passed since the encounter at Le Chateau Noir, and Amara found herself standing in the sleek lobby of Steinberg Industries, her reflection multiplied in the polished marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. She had spent those weeks in careful consideration, researching Victor's company, discussing the opportunity with Marcus and her few close friends, and wrestling with her own instincts about whether to trust someone who had initially treated her so poorly. The decision hadn't been easy. Klaus had been disappointed, but understanding when she gave her notice, acknowledging that the opportunity was too significant to refuse. Her colleagues at the restaurant had thrown her a small farewell party, with Antoine presenting her with a bottle of wine and his business card, insisting she call him when she was ready to open her own establishment. Marcus had been overwhelmingly supportive when she called to explain the situation. His latest medical reports showed continued improvement, but the financial stress had been wearing on both of them. The comprehensive health coverage that came with Victor's offer would ensure his treatment could continue without the constant worry about insurance battles. Now, as she waited for the elevator to take her to the 32nd floor, where Victor's offices were located, Amara reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that afternoon when a man's casual cruelty had sparked an unexpected transformation for both of them. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area that spoke of quiet wealth and sophisticated taste. Original artwork adorned the walls, and the furniture appeared to be custom designed. A woman in her 40s with perfectly styled hair and an immaculate suit approached her with a warm smile. Ms. Williams? I'm Helena Richter, Mr. Steinberg's executive assistant. He's asked me to show you around and introduce you to the team before your meeting with him. Helena's English was flawless, with only the slightest hint of a German accent. As they walked through the offices, she provided context about the company's various divisions and current projects. Amara was impressed by the international scope of the organization and the obvious competence of the employees they encountered. Mr. Steinberg has spoken very highly of you, Helena mentioned as they paused outside a conference room where several people were engaged in what appeared to be an intense planning session. He's quite excited about the cultural integration division you'll be leading. Amara felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with anticipation. Over the past 3 weeks, she had exchanged several professional emails with Victor, discussing the scope of her role and his expectations. Their correspondence had been cordial and businesslike, but she wondered whether the connection they had forged over lunch would translate into an effective working relationship. He's also made some significant changes to company policy since your last conversation. Helena continued with a knowing smile. What kind of changes? Amara asked. Well, for one thing, all executives are now required to spend time working in frontline positions within our various business units. Mr. Steinberg believes it will give leadership better perspective on the experiences of our staff at every level. Amara raised her eyebrows in surprise. This was exactly the kind of policy she might have recommended, but Victor had apparently implemented it on his own initiative. And, Helena added, we've instituted mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all management personnel, with particular focus on unconscious bias and effective communication across different backgrounds. Before Amara could respond, Victor appeared in the hallway, and she was struck by how different he seemed in his own environment. Gone was the casual arrogance she had observed at the restaurant. Instead, he appeared focused and energetic, greeting employees by name as he passed, and showing genuine interest in their responses when he asked about their projects. Amara, Victor said warmly as he approached. Welcome to Steinberg Industries. I hope Helena has been taking good care of you. She's been wonderful, Amara replied. And I'm impressed by what I've seen so far. Victor smiled. And She could see genuine pleasure in his expression. Wait until you see your office. We've set you up in the international division, with a team that I think you'll find both challenging and supportive. As they walked toward her new workspace, Victor explained the current state of the company's European expansion plans. His enthusiasm was contagious, and Amara found herself getting excited about the possibilities ahead. I should mention, Victor said as they paused outside a corner office with windows overlooking the city, that I've been doing some thinking since our conversation at the restaurant. Oh, Amara asked. I realized that if I was going to ask you to help our company develop cultural sensitivity, I needed to address my own biases more systematically. So I've been working with a consultant who specializes in helping executives recognize and overcome unconscious prejudices. Amara was genuinely surprised. That's remarkable, Victor. It was the first time she had used his first name, and something about the informality seemed to please him. It's been humbling, he admitted, but necessary. I discovered that my attitudes were affecting more than just my personal interactions. They were influencing hiring decisions, partnership choices, and strategic planning in ways I hadn't recognized. They entered her office, which was spacious and elegantly appointed, with a view of Berlin's historic district. On the desk was a folder containing her first project assignments, along with a small gift box tied with a silver ribbon. What's this? Amara asked, indicating the gift. Open it, Victor said, looking slightly embarrassed. Inside the box was a beautiful pin engraved with her name and the date, along with a small card. The card read, "To commemorate the beginning of a partnership that will make both of us better. Thank you for your courage and wisdom. V.S." Amara felt tears gathering in her eyes. Victor, this is beautiful. I wanted you to have something to mark this moment, he said. I suspect this job is going to change both of us in ways we can't anticipate yet. Before Amara could respond, there was a knock at the office door. A woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and an animated expression entered, followed by a man with kind eyes and a warm smile. Amara, Victor said, I'd like you to meet Dr. Sarah Mueller and James Chun. Sarah leads our European Market Research Division, and James manages our strategic partnerships. They'll be your primary collaborators on the cultural integration projects. As they exchanged introductions, Amara was struck by the obvious respect both Sarah and James showed for Victor. This was clearly a different version of the man she had encountered at the restaurant, one who had earned genuine loyalty and admiration from his colleagues. We're so excited to have you join the team, Sarah said enthusiastically. Victor has told us about your background and vision, and we think there's tremendous potential for synergy with our current initiatives. Absolutely, James agreed. We've been struggling with some cultural disconnects in our partnerships with European businesses. Your perspective could be exactly what we need to bridge those gaps. Over the next hour, the four of them discussed Amara's initial projects and the resources available to her. She was impressed by the thoughtfulness of her assignment and the clear commitment to giving her the support she needed to succeed. When Sarah and James left to attend other meetings, Victor remained behind, settling into one of the chairs opposite Amara's desk. So, he said with a slight smile, what do you think so far? I think you've created something impressive here, Amara replied honestly. Your employees obviously respect you, and the projects you've described align perfectly with my interests and skills. But, Victor prompted, sensing her reservation. But, I'm still processing the transition from seeing you as someone who dismissed my humanity to working for you as a trusted colleague, Amara admitted. It's a significant psychological shift. Victor nodded thoughtfully. I understand that completely. And I want you to know that you should never hesitate to call me out if you see me falling back into old patterns. One of the things I learned from working with the consultant is that changing ingrained behaviors requires ongoing vigilance and feedback. I appreciate that, Amara said, though I hope it won't be necessary. I hope so too, Victor replied. But I also know that 3 weeks of self-reflection can't undo decades of conditioned responses. I'm going to make mistakes, and when I do, I need people around me who are willing to point them out. Amara was struck by his humility. The man sitting across from her bore little resemblance to the arrogant figure she had served at lunch just weeks before. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. What made you decide to offer me this position? Really? Was it guilt, or genuine recognition of my qualifications, or something else entirely? Victor was quiet for a moment, clearly considering how to answer honestly. Initially, he said finally, it was probably guilt mixed with a desire to prove to myself that I wasn't actually the terrible person your conversation had revealed me to be. But, as I researched your background and thought more carefully about what our company actually needs, I realized that my motivations didn't matter as much as the fact that you were genuinely the right person for this role. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I spent the last 3 weeks reviewing every hire we've made in the past 2 years, looking for patterns in my decision-making. What I found was disturbing. I had consistently favored candidates who looked and sounded like me, even when their qualifications were inferior to other applicants. I had been unconsciously recreating my own biases throughout the organization. Amara listened intently, appreciating his honesty even as she recognized how difficult these admissions must be for someone accustomed to seeing himself as fair and merit-based in his judgments. Offering you this position was the first hiring decision I made based purely on capabilities and potential rather than on superficial comfort with the candidate, Victor continued. It felt like a test of whether I could actually change my behavior rather than just my rhetoric. And how do you think you're doing on that test so far? Amara asked. Victor smiled ruefully. I think I'm getting a passing grade, but there's definitely room for improvement. Having you here will be part of that continuing education. Their conversation was interrupted by Victor's phone, which buzzed with what appeared to be an urgent message. He glanced at it and frowned. I'm sorry, he said, but I need to handle this quickly. There's apparently a situation with one of our restaurant partnerships in Munich that requires immediate attention. Restaurant partnerships? Amara asked with interest. We've been investing in boutique restaurants across Europe as part of our hospitality expansion, Victor explained. Though we've been having cultural integration challenges that I suspect you might have insights about. As Victor stepped out to handle his call, Amara looked around her new office and tried to process the surreal nature of her situation. 3 weeks ago, she had been serving coffee to a man who saw her as beneath his notice. Now she was sitting in a corner office of his company, tasked with helping solve exactly the kind of cultural blindness he had demonstrated. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How's the first day going? Are you sure this guy isn't going to turn out to be a villain in disguise? Amara smiled as she typed back. So far, so good. I think people really can change when they're motivated to. Though ask me again in a few months. Victor returned to find her looking out the window at the Berlin skyline, and something in her expression made him pause in the doorway. Second thoughts? He asked gently. Not second thoughts exactly, Amara replied. More like amazement at how dramatically life can change when people are willing to see each other as fully human. Victor joined her at the window, following her gaze across the city. 6 months later, Amara stood before the board of directors of Steinberg Industries, presenting the quarterly results of the cultural integration division she had built from the ground up. The conference room was filled with some of Europe's most influential business leaders, and the presentation screen displayed impressive metrics. Employee satisfaction up 37%, international partnership success rates improved by 52%, and customer retention in diverse markets increased by 41%. Victor watched from his seat at the head of the polished mahogany table, remembering the woman who had served him coffee with quiet dignity while he conducted his business calls in what he had assumed was the privacy of a foreign language. The transformation had been remarkable, not just in her professional circumstances, but in the impact she had made on the entire organization. The most significant breakthrough, Amara was explaining to the board, came when we implemented the reverse mentoring program. Instead of simply training our executives about cultural differences, we paired them with employees from diverse backgrounds who could provide real-time feedback and insights about decision-making processes. Board member Elizabeth Hoffman raised her hand. Can you give us a specific example of how this has affected business outcomes? Amara smiled, clicking to the next slide. Certainly. 6 months ago, we were struggling to maintain our partnership with a chain of family-owned restaurants in southern Italy. Traditional business approaches weren't working, and we were on the verge of ending the relationship. After implementing cultural integration protocols, we discovered that our quarterly review process was conflicting with Italian family business traditions around holiday periods. She continued, By adjusting our communication style and timing to respect their cultural priorities, we not only saved the partnership, but expanded it. Those restaurants are now our highest performing European partners, and they've introduced us to 3 additional regional chains interested in collaboration. Victor felt a surge of pride as he watched Amara command the room. Her confidence was complete, but never arrogant. She answered complex questions with nuanced understanding and presented data with the skill of someone who truly comprehended both the human and business implications of her work. After the presentation concluded and the board members filed out, expressing unanimous approval for the expansion of Amara's division, Victor approached her with genuine admiration. "That was extraordinary," he said. "You've exceeded every expectation I had when I offered you this position." "Thank you," Amara replied, gathering her materials. "Though I have to say, the support you've provided has made all the difference. Not just financial support, but your willingness to actually change company practices based on my recommendations." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "I've learned that real change requires more than good intentions. It requires systematic commitment and the humility to admit when existing practices aren't working." As they walked toward Victor's office, he reflected on how much both of them had changed since that afternoon at Le Chateau Noir. The cultural integration work had forced him to confront his assumptions not just about individuals, but about entire systems he had taken for granted. Meanwhile, Amara had blossomed in an environment where her capabilities were recognized and supported, developing into one of the most effective leaders in the organization. "I have something to discuss with you," Victor said as they settled into his office, which had been redecorated to include artwork and artifacts from various cultures, a visual reminder of the company's evolving global perspective. Amara looked curious. "About the division expansion? About your future beyond the division," Victor said, his expression serious. "I've been having conversations with the board about succession planning, and your name has come up repeatedly as someone with the vision and leadership skills needed to take this company in new directions." Amara's eyes widened with surprise. "Victor, I've only been here 6 months." "Yes, but in those 6 months, you've demonstrated more strategic insight and transformational leadership than some executives show in entire careers," Victor replied. "The board sees what I see. Someone who understands how to build sustainable success by valuing human potential rather than exploiting it." Before Amara could respond, Victor's assistant knocked and entered with an urgent expression. "Sir," Helena said, "there's a situation at the Munich restaurant that requires your immediate attention. The owner is threatening to terminate our partnership, and he's specifically requesting that you handle the matter personally." Victor frowned. The Munich restaurant had been one of their most challenging partnerships, with ongoing conflicts about management style and operational philosophy. He had been dreading this call for weeks. "What's the specific issue this time?" he asked. "He claims our regional manager insulted his staff and questioned their competence," Helena replied. "He's very upset and says he won't work with anyone from our company except you." Victor looked at Amara with a sudden inspiration. "What if we handled this differently this time?" "What do you mean?" Amara asked. "What if you came with me to Munich? You could observe the interaction and provide insights about the cultural dynamics that might be causing these ongoing conflicts. And if my approach isn't working, you could step in with a different strategy." Amara considered the proposal carefully. "That could be helpful, but only if you're genuinely open to adjusting your approach based on what I observe." "Completely open," Victor assured her. "I've learned that my instincts aren't always reliable when it comes to reading cultural nuances." 2 hours later, they were on Victor's private jet to Munich, reviewing the file on Hans Müller and his family restaurant, Gasthaus Gemütlichkeit. The establishment had been serving traditional Bavarian cuisine for 3 generations, and Hans was fiercely protective of both the restaurant's traditions and his employees' dignity. "Based on what I'm reading," Amara said as she studied the partnership history, "the conflicts seem to stem from different philosophies about employee management and customer service standards. Our regional manager believes in efficiency and quantifiable performance metrics," Victor replied. "Hans apparently sees that as impersonal and disrespectful to his staff's experience and expertise." Amara nodded. "Classic clash between corporate methodology and family business values. Neither approach is wrong, but They're incompatible without some kind of bridge understanding. When they arrived at Gasthaus Gemütlichkeit that evening, the atmosphere was tense. Hans Muller met them at the door, a man in his 50s with kind eyes that currently reflected deep frustration. The restaurant itself was warm and inviting, with traditional wooden furnishings and the comfortable feeling of a place where families had gathered for generations. "Mr. Steinberg," Hans said in accented English, his tone formal but not hostile. "I appreciate you coming personally." "Hans, please call me Victor," Victor replied, extending his hand. "And I'd like you to meet Amara Williams, who leads our cultural integration initiatives. I asked her to join us because I value her perspective on building successful partnerships across different business cultures." Hans shook Amara's hand, studying her face with curiosity. "Cultural integration? That's an interesting title. I help companies find ways to work together effectively while respecting each organization's unique values and traditions," Amara explained. "May we sit down and discuss what's been causing the difficulties with your partnership?" As they settled into a quiet corner of the restaurant, Hans's initial wariness began to fade. He appreciated being asked about his perspective rather than simply being told what needed to change. "The problem," Hans began, "is that your regional manager treats my staff like they are inexperienced children who need constant supervision and correction. These are skilled professionals who have been perfecting their craft for years, some of them decades. When he comes in with his clipboard and his metrics, talking about optimizing performance and streamlining service protocols, it's insulting to everything we've built here." Victor felt his usual impulse to defend his employee's professional approach, but he remembered Amara's presence and forced himself to simply listen. "Can you give us a specific example?" Amara asked gently. "Last week, he told my head chef, a woman who has been cooking traditional Bavarian cuisine for 25 years, that her food presentation needed to be more contemporary to meet modern customer expectations," Hans said, his voice rising with indignation. "This is a traditional restaurant. Our customers come here specifically because they want authentic experiences, not contemporary presentations." Amara nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like there might be a fundamental misunderstanding about what success looks like in this partnership." "Exactly," Hans agreed. "We measure success by customer satisfaction, employee pride in their work, and maintaining the traditions that make this place special. Your manager measures success by speed and efficiency and conformity to corporate standards." Victor finally spoke up, his tone careful and respectful. "Hans, I owe you an apology. It sounds like our approach has been disrespectful to your expertise and your restaurant's unique value. That wasn't our intention, but intention doesn't excuse the impact." Hans looked surprised by the directness of the apology. "I thank you for saying that. What would a successful partnership look like from your perspective?" Amara asked. "What would need to change for you to feel comfortable continuing the relationship?" Hans considered the question seriously. "I would need to work with people who understand that different doesn't mean inferior. My methods may not match your corporate standards, but they work for my customers and my staff. I need partners who respect that wisdom comes from experience, not just from business school." "That makes perfect sense," Victor said, meaning it completely. "And I think we can absolutely restructure our approach to honor that perspective." Over the next 2 hours, the three of them developed a new framework for the partnership. Instead of imposing corporate standards, Steinberg Industries would learn from Gasthaus Gemütlichkeit's successful traditional approaches. Instead of efficiency metrics, they would focus on customer loyalty and employee satisfaction measurements that aligned with the restaurant's values. "I have a proposal," Amara said as their conversation drew to a close. "What if Hans worked with us to develop training materials that other traditional restaurants could use when partnering with international corporations? His insights could help prevent the kinds of cultural conflicts that have been causing problems here." Both men looked intrigued by the suggestion. "You would pay me to teach other restaurant owners how to work with corporations without compromising their values?" Hans asked. "We would pay you to share your expertise about maintaining authenticity while building sustainable business partnerships," Victor corrected. "It's exactly the kind of knowledge our company needs to develop." Hans smiled for the first time since they had arrived. "That sounds like something I could be interested in." As they prepared to leave, Hans walked them to the door with a completely different energy than when they had arrived. "You know, he said to Victor. This is the first time I felt heard rather than just lectured during a business conversation with your company. Victor glanced at Amara, who was smiling quietly. I'm learning that listening is more important than talking in most business situations. It just took me longer to figure that out than it should have. On the flight back to Berlin, Victor and Amara reflected on the evening's success and its broader implications. That was masterful, Victor said. The way you helped both of us see the situation from Hans's perspective changed everything about the dynamic. It's what you did with me at the restaurant, Amara replied. You started listening instead of just assuming you understood the situation. Once people feel heard, they usually become much more open to collaboration. Victor was quiet for a moment, processing the parallel she had drawn. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, he said. About how much potential connection and collaboration we miss when we make assumptions about people based on limited information. It's one of the things I hope we can address through the cultural integration work, Amara said. Not just within your company, but in how your business interacts with communities and partners across different cultures. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need, Victor replied. Though I suspect it's going to challenge some of our existing practices and partnerships. Change usually does, Amara observed. The question is whether the organization is ready to prioritize authentic improvement over comfortable familiarity. Victor looked at her with growing respect. I think that's going to be the real test of this whole initiative. And of whether I've actually learned the lessons you tried to teach me at lunch that day. As they stood together looking out at the city that had brought them both to this unexpected crossroads, neither of them could anticipate the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. But both sensed that they had embarked on something that could transform not only their professional relationship, but their understanding of how people from different worlds could work together to create meaningful change. As Victor answered his phone, and Amara moved away to attend to other customers. Both of them carried with them the awareness that something fundamental had shifted between them. The afternoon that had begun with casual cruelty and invisible suffering had evolved into an encounter that challenged both their assumptions about themselves and each other. Victor found himself conducting his business call with less intensity than usual, part of his attention still focused on processing everything Amara had told him and shown him about himself. Meanwhile, Amara served her other customers with renewed energy, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine that morning. The restaurant around them continued its elegant operation, but Table 7 had become the site of something unprecedented, a genuine meeting of minds across social and economic barriers that rarely allowed for such connection. The question now was whether this moment of understanding could survive the return to their respective real worlds. Sequences. Amara looked at him carefully, weighing her words, and Victor realized he was holding his breath waiting for her response. This was the moment that would determine whether their interaction had the potential to create real understanding or whether it would remain just another uncomfortable encounter between strangers from different worlds. Victor had opened himself to honest feedback in a way he hadn't done in years, and Amara held the power to either humble him further or offer him a path toward redemption. The restaurant continued to buzz with quiet activity around them, other customers enjoying their meals, unaware that a profound moment of human connection was unfolding at Table 7. Klaus watched from across the room, noting the intense conversation but unable to hear its content, curious about what could possibly be keeping his most important customer engaged in such lengthy discussion with one of his servers. Neither Victor nor Amara was aware of the attention they were drawing. They were both too focused on this unexpected opportunity for authentic human communication, something that had become rare in both of their worlds for different reasons. G through her system. I couldn't help but notice you've been having quite a few business conversations today. Victor raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised that she had initiated a conversation. Yes, well, business doesn't stop for lunch. Though I don't suppose you would understand the demands of running a global enterprise. Amara smiled, the expression genuine for the first time since she had begun serving him. Actually, sir, I understand more than you might think. Your business certainly seems demanding, especially given all the personnel challenges you've been discussing. For the first time all day, Victor looked genuinely surprised. There was something in Amara's tone that suggested she knew more than she was letting on, but he couldn't quite identify what had changed about her demeanor. The stage was set for a confrontation that neither of them fully anticipated, one that would force both individuals to confront assumptions they had made about each other and about the world around them. Victor's afternoon of casual cruelty was about to meet an opponent he hadn't expected, and Amara's months of patient endurance were about to give way to something far more powerful.